Teen accounts let teens aged 13 to 17 request their own rides and order meals with a parent or guardian's permission, while key safety features are built in automatically. This is something that I use with my 17-year-old son because it gives him a bit more independence while still allowing me to oversee his trips. Once you add your teen to your family profile, they'll receive an invitation to create their own teen account. From there, you can follow trips in real time, receive notifications throughout the ride, and stay connected from pickup to drop-off. Safety features like PIN verification, ride check, and destination-locked trips are built in, and age-restricted items on Uber Eats are automatically filtered out. Only highly rated, experienced drivers will receive teen account trip requests from teens, and drivers can choose to accept those trips. For more information, visit Uber Teens online, and thanks to Uber for supporting The Amber Mac Show.
It's so interesting, Amber. It reminds me, like, most people really like their own lawyer, but they dislike lawyers, like, generally. I kind of get the same sense from talking to folks in different industries across government, private sector. A lot of people privately are very excited about AI and what it can do for their own tasks, but they lament what they imagine to be the broader social consequences of it.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Hi, I'm Amber Mac, and on this week's show, we're going to talk about the return of MySpace to make social media better. I wish I were joking about that one. And speaking of social media, Mark Zuckerberg just posted an AI manifesto. We will dive into the 6,000-word document and why it should scare us all.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to hear from inside of the tech billionaire bubble, so that's going to be fun. We're also going to explain how the ongoing memory crisis is affecting the world's biggest phone and laptop companies. And in this week's feature interview, Amber speaks with the author of Superjustice about why we might actually need more AI to help everyday citizens navigate legal realities.
Newsfeed.
Well, the tech world's least deserving mogul, idea thief and habitual liar Mark Zuckerberg has released his AI manifesto. In The Future is for Everyone, the Meta CEO tries to convince anyone who actually cares what he has to say that the many valid AI concerns raised by others are nothing to be worried about, and then sketches out a self-serving 6,500-word essay about how we all need to relax, knowing that the future of civilization is in the hands of such responsible caretakers like myself.
I woke up to that news this week, and I felt pretty much the same way that you felt, although I think calling him the least deserving mogul, an idea thief, and habitual liar is a whole other level.
I mean, if the shoe fits.
Fair. Now, in his piece, Zuckerberg told Axios that, and I'm quoting here, "I'm personally more worried about centralization than I am about any of the specific risks others are talking about." Jeff, I mean, is that because he has a billionaire island bunker to retreat to if things go terribly wrong? Because I think that's the reality we're in right now. And he also writes, if the power of super intelligence is held by a small number of individuals, businesses, governments, or AI itself, then that will naturally lead to outcomes that are less favorable for everybody else, end quote. But he doesn't really seem to acknowledge that that is exactly where we are right now, and he is part of that. He also argues that no one country or group or individual should have too much control over AI. And then he goes on to say that it is essential that America leads this race and that government policy must be designed to mitigate risks. So to be fair, Jeff, it is a bit incoherent at times. I'm not sure he fully thought this through.
Yeah, I actually asked ChatGPT if this was written by AI, and ChatGPT was like, probably a little mix of both things. So asked it to point out the inherent contradictions and stuff. It's kind of a fascinating approach to it to just see what's written in there. But there are multiple places where he seems to be arguing against himself. For instance, relative to AI taking over most jobs in the future, he writes that, quote, "No matter how intelligent AI becomes, there will always be a finite amount of compute and therefore an opportunity cost for how we use it. So saying that it's essentially it's a scarce resource like everything else. But then he goes on to say that, quote, everyone will have free or affordable access to these tools and that the abundance of the future can be shared by everyone. And those two things can't match up. If there's a scarcity of resources, then who do you think is going to be using those resources? It's certainly not going to be the poor and the meek. Anyway, overall, his manifesto seems to me to be kind of an ill-disguised positioning document to justify why people need to invite more data centers into their neighborhoods. Because, as he describes it, and they put some money out there saying how they're going to help communities and all this stuff. But again, it's Mark Zuckerberg so who knows? But basically, it's like, yeah, sure, you just need to invite this stuff into your communities, and it's all going to be good, man. So don't listen to those other guys. I'm telling you, we're fine.
I hate to be super cynical here, but it feels like this is a giant distraction. And it's also certainly very telling in terms of this manifesto. And there's no shortage of examples where Zuckerberg says Meta will do this to help everyone. And yet, Meta has not lived up to many of its own commitments over the years to do better for its users, as a growing number of court cases have and will continue to pile up. More this week, for example, in early August, a judge in New Mexico ordered Meta to pay more than $500 million to start a fund to repair the harm it's done to children in the state. And I have to say, well, it's good to see that Meta is being held to account. It would be a lot better if Meta actually sincerely worked to prevent harming children rather than just being made to pay for the harms it's done. Which, Jeff, this is why I feel like in some ways this manifesto feels like a total distraction from yet another lawsuit that is focused on Meta hurting kids.
Well, and all of these AI CEO guys they're PR people at this point. They're all trying to sell us on this future that they keep vaguely changing how they think about it depending on what they need, and it feels like we're being treated like a bunch of rubes. And as relative to Meta, as Wired recently reported, this is the company that was just caught running more than 50 image and video paid ads that included explicit AI-generated child sexual abuse material, some linking out to nudify apps where you can take the clothes off of people using AI. This included things like a thumbnail of a young girl putting on lip gloss, which then morphed into her performing a sexual act when the video starts, among lots of other disturbing examples. You can go out and read about them, including things like AI putting a child's face over somebody having sex with adults. It's just disturbing, and these are the things that Mark Zuckerberg's AI tools are now tasked with, as they've gotten rid of most human moderation, as we've all experienced. They're the guardians of this. They're not doing a good job. As Wired says in their coverage, quote, these ads made no effort to mask the images or hide what they were promoting. And it's important to point out that this isn't content posted by third parties on Facebook or Instagram. These are ads that were reviewed, approved, and allowed to run by Meta, never encountering any interference in that while the company collected the ad dollars. So it's just crazy to say, trust us, we know what we're doing, and expect people to believe that. And this follows a separate BBC investigation that found ads on Instagram promoting the sale of child sexual abuse material. So it's a little rich to hear Mark Zuckerberg repeatedly call on us all to trust his AI technology when it is so obviously not up to the task.
I couldn't agree more. This is exactly what I thought when I saw that news that he had released this manifesto. And listen, Meta has done a lot of things wrong over the years. We've covered Meta's scam ad empire in the past, but another investigation from ABC News found that Facebook's invitation-only content monetization program, which incidentally I was just invited to, has been paying literal neo-Nazis and white supremacists in Australia for content that is in obvious violation of Facebook's own hate speech policies. And in terms of trust in its AI, add Meta to a list of companies whose AI agents have recently gone rogue, hacking into another company during cybersecurity testing. Do these guys really think that we don't understand what's happening? I mean, and this is leading, of course, to the beginning of a lot of pushback against AI in general.
Oh, yeah, and very deservedly so, but, I'm not sure that message has quite broken through the bubble that these guys live in, Amber. I see nudity on Instagram Reels all the time. It's the little crazy things they do to get around the AI, it's embarrassingly simple stuff, and it is all over the place. So it's just ludicrous for them to, it's like the see no evil, hear no evil, do no evil kind of thing. As the godfather of AI, Jeffrey Hinton, who we've had on the show previously and who is just awesome, recently noted about AI agents on CNN, quote, "What's happening is these things are getting smarter. And I think as they get smarter, we're going to see more and more complex intentions that they have and more ability to escape control." So he's talking about cyber attacks and things like that. Again, we've seen that from OpenAI, Anthropic, now Meta. I'm sure there's many more to come. And he noted separately in terms of cyber attacks that, quote, "The future is very uncertain. People say the defender may have more resources than the attacker, but the problem is that the attacker only needs to be successful once, and the defender needs to be successful every time." And that's just the kind of obvious thing that Zuckerberg's manifesto just cavalierly glosses over, pretending it's not an issue at all. And that's Meta's approach to most things, as we've seen with all of the issues with the child sexual abuse material, with the its effect on young women, with all these sorts of things. It's if it's not actually not a problem, it's something that, oh, don't worry, we just fixed our AI, so that's not a problem anymore, and it's obviously still a problem. So it's just hard to listen to them lie to us that much.
And if I can just add something before our next story, I do want to say too, in terms of Instagram specifically, I mean, their AI seems horrific in terms of being able to identify hate speech as one example. I mean, if he really thinks he should be sort of a beacon in terms of what's happening in AI, you're exactly right. The AI that Meta uses really sucks,
It
and
does.
and I say this because as someone who is casually on TikTok, their AI is amazing to be able to kind of demote people and block people who are displaying hate speech, for example. It's infinitely better. So, Zuckerberg's companies just are not good on the AI front. Now, one thing that Facebook did kill is, of course, MySpace. And we just saw news recently that the owners of MySpace have announced that they're going to relaunch what was the world's first global social media network. There are not a lot of details beyond that, which was revealed in a new documentary about MySpace, but we will be keeping our eyes on this story as it develops.
Yeah, I mean, that'll be interesting. Although, as we both know, it's so hard to scale new social networks up to the size of user base they need to succeed. So it's far from sure that a new MySpace is going to be a success. But at least maybe we'll find out what MySpace Tom, everybody's first friend from MySpace, is up to these days. Because of all the things I remember about MySpace, I can still picture the MySpace Tom guy. In other news, you've probably heard about the RAM shortages that are being caused by the AI boom. AI companies just buying up all the RAM because it's essential in what they do. And that's something that's forced Apple, Sony, Microsoft, and lots of other companies to raise their hardware prices. And unfortunately, it looks like it's not going to be ending anytime soon, with Samsung recently saying that memory shortages will actually worsen next year in 2027, and that will continue through 2028.
And even though the big RAM manufacturers are increasing spending to ramp up manufacturing, it doesn't look like that will result in enough new supply to change things until about 2029 or 2030. So that is not great, with prices expected to rise even more in the meantime. Now, speaking of hardware, according to Bloomberg, it looks like the mysterious AI device that OpenAI has been developing with Johnny Ive, former legendary Apple designer, is a donut shaped battery powered pocketable smart speaker that will launch in 2027. I'm not sure that's the revolutionary product that some people have been anticipating, but I certainly will be curious to give it a try when it comes out, especially with Johnny behind it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see the actual form factor there because if the guy's good at anything, it's designing beautiful things. So, in terms of functionality, we'll have to see. I'm not much for something sitting in my pocket from OpenAI that's listening to everything I do, if that's what we're talking about, and it probably is. So, yeah, the devil will be in the details with that. But since you mentioned cool hardware, I got to share the latest device coming out of Ukraine, which is an unmanned ground vehicle that fires out nets to capture enemy drones. So these nets can reach a distance of like 45 meters or almost 150 feet. There's the ability to simultaneously fire out multiple nets at different targets, drones flying by to disable them. And I have to say, the childhood Jeff in me finds this exceedingly cool, and it's very G.I. Joe. I can almost picture a G.I. Joe toy of this thing. So it's fun stuff in an unfortunate situation, but wow, another interesting piece of tech coming out of the unfortunate war in Ukraine.
It's been fascinating to see all the drone related inventions that are coming out of Ukraine. And speaking of defense, Canada's federal government has announced it will be investing more than $20 million to help develop Canada's first secure quantum focused defense innovation hub. Led by the University of Calgary, the Defense Innovation Secure Hub, or DISH, is a consortium of 13 organizations that will, as per Defense Minister David McGuinty's statement, shape the next generation of defense capabilities where Canada must be prepared to lead, not follow.
Yeah, I'm all of this stuff. There's certainly lots of pieces moving into place here. So I'm really curious to see, especially here in Canada, how that goes. And as an ex-computer scientist, I just have to say that it's pretty incredible how far we've come since I got my master's degree in the early 2000s. Uh, Functioning AI, emergent quantum capabilities becoming real things, private space travel, and lots more. It really makes it seem like we're starting to live in the future. But just like Mark Zuckerberg's Manifesto and Elon Musk's ridiculously testy interview with the Economist show, we're being promised a lot of things that aren't really materializing. In fact, a recent BBC article entitled "Tech Leaders Say AI Means Less Work, Their Staff Say They Work Up to 90 Hours a Week" really got me thinking about this particular problem. The article mentions how in December 22, not very long ago, a senior engineering director at Google predicted that AI will allow developers to complete a week's worth of work in 4 days or less by 2025. So, how many people do you see, how many programmers do you see working 4-day weeks there, Amber? Do you think AI is really measuring up to that particular ambition?
I think that's just silly. I mean, I've always been, again, really skeptical when people say, oh, this is going to save us more time. That I think that is just not true. Maybe it'll save more time in terms of certain tasks. But listen, the future where people are working less has not exactly progressed as some of the tech leaders thought it would. Now, the article also cites how OpenAI had urged companies to experiment with 4-day work weeks with no change in pay, justified by how much AI could increase employee efficiency. And then goes on to say how OpenAI itself didn't bother to follow its own advice on the matter. In fact, a UC Berkeley study involving hundreds of workers said that using AI resulted in employees working at a faster pace, taking on a broader set of tasks, and here's the catch, extending their work into more hours of the day, partially because those workers needed to constantly check on what their AI tools were outputting. I mean, it's so obvious, I think, in so many ways that we just can't get rid of humans yet.
And as the French say, quelle surprise, really. We pointed out all the time how the human element in this is essential. You can't trust AI to it just doesn't know if what it's doing is right. So we'll be in the mix for quite some time, I imagine. And I've done a lot of thinking about the broken promises of tech leaders, the extraordinary amount of wealth inequality today, and the real potential behind AI. And I've come up with a concept for an AI agent that I think can meaningfully change the world in ways that all of the rest of us, not the uber rich, but the rest of us could really get behind. And I'm going to talk to you about that after the break on the OtherMac.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
For a chance to win a smart home bundle from TP-Link, here's a fun and creative back-to-school internet challenge for anyone 18 and older. Turn a Tapo camera into a one-of-a-kind robot icon. 5 finalists will be selected, and the Bot Your Cam community will choose 3 winners. This is a chance to use whatever design tool that you love to create a cute, quirky, or adorable character. Every person who enters will receive an exclusive discount code towards their next Tapo purchase. In other words, everybody wins something. Visit the Bot Your Cam website this August for more information.
The OtherMac.
It seems pretty obvious, regardless of the increasing pushback against AI by many, that we're going to have artificial intelligence agents in our future, whether we want them or not. Big tech leaders from Sam Altman to Elon Musk have claimed that this will lead to a future, perhaps as soon as only 5 or 10 years from now, where money will no longer be relevant because AI will do everything laborious that humans used to do, coming up with solutions for all our problems along the way. Now, I definitely think that there is no future where the uber wealthy, which definitely includes all of the big tech leaders, will no longer care that they have more money than everyone else. And it's gotten me thinking of a way to get the rest of us on side if AI really is going to be able to solve some of our most important problems. One of my biggest frustrations is that I truly believe humanity has the solutions right at hand for the vast majority of our problems. But the real barrier is just not having enough money to do what's needed to be done in the most efficient and effective way possible. So may I suggest that an extraordinarily good use for agentic AI is tackling a problem that's in desperate need of solving. Namely, in an age where there are literal trillionaires and yet more than 1 in 10 people go to bed hungry each night, may I propose an agentic AI that is trained and tasked with finding ways to effectively tax the very rich, who we've always been told will find ways to avoid being taxed, and so it's impossible to tax them more, and then employ that AI to collect those taxes. As one of my favorite comedians, Bill Hicks, once said, quote, "The problem isn't a lack of money, food, water, or land. The problem is that you've given control of these things to a group of greedy psychopaths who care more about maintaining their power than helping mankind." End quote. Has that ever rung as true as it does today? So, since these extraordinarily rich tech leaders insist on foisting AI on us, with their dubious claims of a better future for all, why don't the rest of us put our thumbs on the scale by leveraging that AI first and foremost to make the extremely wealthy finally pay their fair share? That's an AI agent I could certainly get behind. I won't get into the specifics of what should be done here, and hey, that's what the AI is for, right? But let's take a look at a few quick stats to back up why this is such a pressing problem. First of all, the US, the richest country in the world, and the one with the most billionaires, has more than 1 in 10 households living below the poverty line. In fact, between 1989 and 2022, the top 1% of US households saw their wealth grow over 100 times more than the wealth of the median US household. And let's zoom out from the States for a minute with the fact that the dozen richest people in the world own more wealth than the poorest 50% of people on Earth. That's 12 people with more wealth than over 4 billion people. And look at the trajectory of that over time. In 2010, that number was 388 of the richest people. In 2015, it was 80 of the richest people. By 2019, it's 26 of the richest people. And today, as I said, it's 12 people. That's like each of them making more than over 333 million people, which just sounds like a math error and is definitely not a fair way for the world to exist. And if you're wondering why politicians haven't rescued the rest of us from this, consider that billionaires are more than 4,000 times more likely than your average person to hold political office. And we can see by the number of tech leaders attending Trump's events that they certainly don't even have to hold political office to be politically involved, with Elon Musk being the most brutally obvious example of that. As former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis said, "We can either have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both," end quote. And it's pretty easy to see the impact this is having on our society. We're all heading into a future where AI will change our world in a multitude of ways. And if someone could please take this idea of AI figuring out how to effectively tax the uber rich and put it into action, then at least we'll know that at least one of the ways that it's going to benefit the rest of us, and not just the wealthiest people on Earth, who already have much more than they deserve, will be through a mechanism like this, and allow us to pay for the things we need to do. So let us know your thoughts in the comments on social media. I'm the OtherMac.
Thank you so much for that, Jeff. I'm sure we'll get some comments on this topic, and I have a few of my own that I might save for a future episode. And coming up next, I speak with the author of Superjustice about why we might need more AI in our legal system. Stay tuned for that.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
AI will likely transform law, but what it may not do is automatically produce justice. Superjustice is a new book that unpacks how we can build law for, in the author's words, human flourishing. The book's co-author, Benjamin Alarie, has spent more than a decade applying artificial intelligence to tax and law. Benjamin joined Amber to explain what the term means and how we can get super justice for everyone. Here's their conversation.
AI Spotlight.
Ben, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Amber.
I wanted to dive into the title of your book, Superjustice, and mention a podcast interview that I heard you on just recently, where you said that justice and the future should be more like public roads, expected, available, and even accessible. What do you mean by that?
I think what I mean by that is justice for too many people, day in and day out, is this expensive, slow, confusing thing that they think is not really for them. It's for the big companies. It's for, folks who are wealthy and probably have one or more lawyers with whom they're in contact with frequently. And they think about hearing about just how expensive it is to hire a lawyer. And I'll confess, as a law professor, um, most legal services are priced, outside of easy affordability for someone like me. So, um, you know, it's daunting. And I think the real promise of super justice is the cost of accessing legal reasoning, legal intelligence, legal know-how is going to drop precipitously. And so instead of being the scarce thing that we allocate by, having attorneys charge a lot of money for their services, instead we'll have a world in which the cost of accessing legally abundant information and know-how and guidance is going to be pervasive. And so it's going to present an opportunity for us together to create a legal system that is like public roads, as you put it. It's something that you just kind of take for granted. If I have a legal problem, I will be able to get the legal remedy to which I'm entitled. And it's not going to be a mystery how to access that remedy. And I'll be able to do it maybe with a few clicks on my smart device. And I will have the guidance there and be able to see it right through to a remedy. And it'll disappear as this thing that feels so remote and expensive and inaccessible.
I suppose when we think about access to public roads, there are still barriers to entry because you do need to be able to, of course, afford an automobile and insurance and get your license. One of the things I think about, and absolutely in support of this idea that justice and legal services would be more accessible to more people, but I'm really curious what you think about how our system would be able to handle this, knowing that if we had more access, I would assume that more people would get involved in various types of legal engagements and lawsuits. I mean, do you imagine a scenario where it becomes too much for the system we have in place?
I do imagine that we will need to improve our legal institutions. And I think AI is going to be a huge way in which we can actually improve these institutions. The goal, I don't think, should be to speed up the existing institutions, speed up all of the existing processes that we have in our legal systems. And here, mostly, I have in mind, North America, the U.S., Canada, and the UK. The systems that I am most familiar with, but I think it's quite similar in many places around the world. We should be thinking about how do we build new institutions, leveraging these newly unlocked capabilities to build more responsive legal infrastructure, change the processes, change the institution, so that we can accommodate a greater, flow of legal questions, legal disputes, legal resolutions. One thing I will say, which is often surprising, and it comes if you sit with this problem for long enough, and I've been thinking about this for a long time, decades, in fact, as a problem, is if you increase the ability with which people understand their legal rights, their legal obligations, and they know that the other side is going to have greater insight into the legal rights and the legal obligations, it tends to produce quicker resolution, quicker settlement, because if you know that, Amber, I'm going to make up a self-serving example here. If you know that you owe me $100, and I know that you owe me $100, and I know, and you know that I'll be able to convince the court that you owe me $100, you'll probably just pay me the $100, because it's way easier than fighting about it. Then if we fight about it, then you're gonna have to pay my attorney's fees. You're gonna have to pay your attorney's fees. The court will be irritated with you. And so the least resistance path for us to go forward with that $100 that you owe me is you just say, okay, Ben, here's the $100. Would you take 95? And I might say, yes, I'll take 95. And then we can all move on with our life. And so if we get the institutions right, if we get the processes right, a lot of that facilitation and the resolution will happen more quickly. One of the reasons we see disputes get bogged down is because it is so opaque, and you don't know what the outcome is going to be. And you may think you don't owe me $100. I may be extremely confident you owe me $100. And then we're each willing to like pay up to $100, or to either collect it or to avoid having to pay something that we don't think is owed. And that's what gives rise to a lot of the the bogged down nature of civil disputes, at least in North America. It's that lack of visibility into what would actually happen if we ended up really going to court over something.
I think it's a fair point. I mean, there could be what is almost a leveling up. I am also certain that when most people hear this conversation about more AI in our legal system, they immediately come to this point where they assume that means that it is the end of lawyers. And I wanted to mention something that you wrote on LinkedIn where you said it's not about whether AI will replace lawyers, it's about what happens when legal systems can finally operate at the scale and speed the world actually requires. Can you unpack that?
Sure. I think what we're going to see is super justice allowing law to learn faster and better. Many folks will be familiar with how the common law operates, kind of case by case adjudication. You get a result, it sets a precedent. Future judges looking at similar situations will take into account the cases that came before. Now imagine we have an AI that is able to access all of the case law, all of the legislation globally, is able to mine all of that past precedent, and come up with novel resolutions, creative solutions to new problems. Um, and add to that all of the different kinds of information that you can find on the web. So not just what a lawyer would call doctrine or precedent or legislation, statutory law, but all sorts of information about the world, incentives, about public policy, about how folks are resolving different kinds of social, economic, political problems. Imagine mining all of that for insight into how to resolve disputes, and then being able to learn from new things that the system itself is like pioneering as it goes forward. Accelerating that learning will be enormously powerful, and it'll allow the legal system to become more precise over time. It'll become less this like blunt political struggle and more, at least in the way that Professor Becker and I approach it in Superjustice, a more decentralized and democratized governance system that's leveraging the pace of learning that is newly unlocked, leveraging AI. And so ultimately, what it becomes is a system that is less about reaction and reacting to disputes that are brought before the system to prevention and being proactive and counseling people about how to protect themselves, how to make sure that the way that they're approaching their businesses, their relationships are going to be robust. And when things do go sideways, and things I'm pretty confident are going to continue to go sideways um, from time to time. Life is all about dents and how you fix them. It'll help us fix those dents more quickly and better than we've ever been able to do it before.
One of the things that you talk about in the book early on is the fact that there are many pillars of dysfunction in our legal system. I think already in our conversation we've talked about a couple. Accessibility is one of them. What are some of those other dysfunctional areas that people should be aware of?
I mean, I think time is a pervasive concern of people in the legal system in the tax context. So I'm a tax law professor at the University of Toronto, and I follow some of the leading tax disputes as they work their way through the courts. Amber, people would be astonished, I think, to learn that sometimes disputes, they start when a taxpayer files a tax return. It can take the tax authorities several years before they actually go back and audit, especially complex corporate returns, for example, and something called transfer pricing. I have in mind lots of like cross-border facts and economic analyses, all this stuff form the basis of this position. The tax authorities may, you know, reassess the taxpayer, take a different view of what the taxpayer's obligations are, issue a reassessment. The taxpayer may dispute that internally with the tax authorities. Then they may ultimately end up at trial before the tax court. And then it will go from the tax court to an appellate court if the taxpayer doesn't like the outcome or the government doesn't like the outcome. And then that appeal is then can be further appealed to the Supreme Court, where a panel of 9 judges will hear it. And this has happened. And then a panel of 9 judges will hear the case. And then they may decide that there was something procedurally that wasn't quite right in how the trial court, for example, handled the original trial, send it back to trial court, and then start the whole process again. And some of these cases take literally, you know, 15, 18, 20 years to resolve. And this is like one case. And every year taxpayers are filing tax returns. And every year these big corporations and everybody is filing a tax return. And there's time to resolve these things. And the immense investment of many thousands of hours of expert, people, tax professionals invested in working through all of this stuff. It's the biggest issue, and time is expensive, and really talented people have a really high opportunity cost. This is what an economist would say. There are other things that they could be doing with their time and effort that would be probably, I would argue, maybe socially more valuable. They're talented people. They could be doing all sorts of really productive things, and I think, don't get me wrong, I think making sure that tax justice is done is also a very important output from the system. I just think we can do it at significantly lesser resource cost. And one of those big things is time. We are all in our human bodies. There's a clock ticking for each one of us. The longest anyone has ever lived, as far as I know, is 121 or 122 years. Now we may see a relaxation of that in the coming decades as biology advances, leveraging AI. But we all have limited time on this earth, and for a lot of people, litigating, getting into legal disputes exacts a psychological toll on them, and that's very costly too. And so it's the time, it's the delay, it's, living with these things that are kind of hanging over your head or they're monkeys on your back for many years is one of the principal dysfunctions as I see it.
It also feels like we are in a really interesting time right now in Canada where we need to do things differently. There's a lot of talk in a couple of sectors that I mostly work in, which are technology as well as the mining sector, about Canada's opportunity at this point in time. I know you wrote a memo a few months ago for Build Canada talking about what our government should do right now when it comes to adopting AI and integrating artificial intelligence into all types of systems. Uh, why do you think the time is right for that to happen, or maybe the time is passing right in front of us?
Look, I think there's so much opportunity. I'm a big believer that the technology that already exists will significantly, even if we had no further progress with the artificial intelligence technology that has been developed so far, has massive um, unreaped rewards for improving the performance of all, like, virtually every industry. Government is no exception. Government is often an easy target. People pick on government. We saw, all of the Doge activities south of the border in the U.S. And I think the results from that Doge exercise have been quite mixed. I think that's a reasonable way to characterize what's happened there. There was a lot of talk about huge inefficiencies and it's going to save a fortune. I think the results have been rather mixed. But that doesn't mean there isn't significant room to improve government. But it's kind of the hard, boring work of, okay, let's understand the technology. Let's do a really robust audit of what are the jobs we're trying to get done. Now, how do we engineer a system that's going to be robust to future improvements in the technology? How do we position our improvement strategy so that we can meet improving technology as it continues to develop and re-engineer processes so that they are going to be able to benefit from improved technology going forward. So a great example is tax administration. Tax administration historically has often been one of the very first movers in adopting new technology, going back right to like the 1950s and the IRS adopting IBM computing technology to help facilitate processing tens of millions of income tax returns. And the CRA, the Canada Revenue Agency here in Canada, has been an adopter of technology. One of the things that I would love to see governments do more of is not feel like they have to build everything internally. So there tends to be this, feeling, oh, we should build it all ourselves. Instead, I've been championing, governments looking to the private sector to find, companies like the one, and obviously I have an interest in arguing this, but looking to companies like Blue Jay for assistance with AI and tax. We now at Blue Jay have 6,000 firms, principally accounting firms and law firms, who are using Blue Jay's technology for tax work. And there's no reason why we need to reinvent all of that technology inside our governments. It exists now, and it can be, accessed just like taxpayers and their very sophisticated counsel are leveraging AI to figure out how to minimize the amount of tax that those clients are paying. The IRS, the Canada Revenue Agency. I argue like it would make a lot of sense for the CRA or the IRS to be leveraging Blue Jay technology to make sure that they're collecting every dollar of tax that is appropriately owed to them. So it's a general purpose technology that really both sides should have access to and be using.
I think one of the barriers to all of this, perhaps, especially here in Canada, is this public sentiment about artificial intelligence and what I would say is growing backlash against AI. Even though I think you and I can have this conversation, we can see all sorts of opportunities for efficiencies, whether it's in the legal system or healthcare or beyond. But I think there's a lack of awareness from the average person in terms of literacy around AI. And I'm thinking just this morning I was reading an article about a lawyer in New Brunswick who had admitted to misusing AI and has since been restricted from using AI for a period of time in his practice. And we see stories like this. So I think the public starts to think, all AI is bad, like no AI in anything, especially government. Is that the type of thing that you think that we can overcome? And is there any way to potentially do so?
I think the solution is to improve AI's functionality, improve its performance. I mean, I'm not as familiar with the case of the New Brunswick lawyer that you referenced, but in that example, had this attorney used an AI system to assist with his legal practice, and the AI performed extremely well and actually got everything right, and he you know satisfied his professional ethical obligations and validated that yes, indeed, that was correct, and he double checked it. There would be no issue at all, as far as I can tell. And so, I think it's incumbent on the folks who are providing these kinds of technologies to build safeguards and guardrails around them and to make it easier for professionals to validate and double check what is coming out of these systems. And so when I hear stories like that, Amber, my reaction is as somebody who has a hand in helping to build one of these systems for tax professionals, yeah, this validates our own approach at Blue Jay, which is like, how do we make this as auditable and as verifiable as quickly as we can for busy tax professionals who are trying to get the right answers for their clients? So how do we help them, you know, make sure that they are providing correct guidance? If you're providing correct guidance, that's actually really, really, where all this stuff begins and ends. It's tough to be engaged in any kind of you know, malpractice if you're giving exceptionally, strong advice to your clients. But then how do we also allow them to show their work and to prove that they've actually double checked it so that they can feel good, when when their head hits the pillow at night. Like I did a great amount of work today. I helped more people than I've been able to help ever before because of the technology that I've been leveraging in my practice, and I'm confident that it's right. Um, so often, lawyers find themselves under a time crunch, and this is where you see, like, talking about hallucinations. There are a number of these cases, hundreds of them, I think, across North America now, of lawyers rushing to get work done, leveraging AI haphazardly, submitting briefs with hallucinations, incorrect arguments, incorrect references, manufactured quotes. Um, and they're not checking them because there's too much time pressure because they're trying to help too many people and they don't have enough time in the day to actually give each case the attention it deserves. And so actually this is like a symptom of some of those dysfunctions that we talked about earlier, leading people well intentioned. I don't think, any of the lawyers who have run into these problems were meaning to do wrong by their client or by the court, to submit incorrect work. They were trying to help that client with the time that they could actually, um, you know allocate to that case, and the tools just aren't good enough. So build better tools, build tools that are human centered. Think about the humans the in that context who are going to be affected. Think about the clients, think about the professionals who are super busy trying to help as many clients as they can, and then think about the courts who are often consuming these materials. And I think if we keep our minds on the humans and how the technology can support the humans involved, I think we'll be in a much better spot. Now, I don't know that's going to completely save the reputation of AI, but I think that's the right direction to be thinking, and it's where our hearts are at Blue Jay.
Just one last question for you because you would have much more insight into this than I certainly do. But how open are we here in Canada? Whether it's across different levels of government or what you're seeing in the legal world to this future that you really lay out in this book in terms of super justice. Like, what's the sentiment like, generally speaking?
It's so interesting, Amber. It reminds me, like most people really like their own lawyer, but they dislike lawyers like generally. I kind of get the same sense from talking to folks in different industries across government, private sector. A lot of people privately are very excited about AI and what it can do for their own tasks, but they lament what they imagine to be the broader social consequences of it. I think there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of, well, I don't really know how to get started. I'm using AI, I'm like planning my family trip to, wherever they're going, and it's fantastic, and I like have this back and forth with it. I end up with this amazing itinerary that would have taken me so much longer to develop had I done it on my own. And so they see the power of AI to help them and things like that, and then they think about some of the things that they're using it to help them with in their day-to-day work, and they get excited. But then you try to systematize it, and they get kind of nervous about it. And it's part of the motivation for having written Superjustice with my good friend and co-author Samuel Becker. We wanted to really point out the system-wide positive possibilities. Not that it's a guarantee, but if we are open to it and we embrace it and we design for this possible future, I'm a huge believer that we'll be able to reap the benefits.
Thanks, Benjamin and Amber. That's all for today's episode. We hope you enjoyed this week's show. And remember, you can watch this week and every week's The OtherMac headlines and interviews over on YouTube at Amber Mac. Or you can subscribe to The Amber Mac Show wherever you get your podcasts or listen on SiriusXM. So thanks for being here with us this week, and we will see you soon.
Hey, I'm Amber Mack, and at every single keynote where I'm presenting, I get asked the same question over and over again. How do you stay on top of all things tech? Well, every week I send out a free email newsletter. All you have to do is sign up at ambermac.com/newsletter.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, SiriusXM 167.